What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we are checking out the brand new POCO F7. Now, I don't mean to exaggerate that long, quiet pause on the end of F7, but if you're familiar with POCO's smartphone lineup for this year, you know that there's already been an F7 Pro, which I unboxed on the channel not too long ago, and an F7 Ultra. This is just the F7, no additional descriptor. I suppose you could call it the regular F7 if you want to, and while you might think it's the lowest spec'd F7 in the trio of F7s, there's actually a couple of things that make this F7 better than the other higher tier F7s. Are you with me so far? If not, that's all right, because I'm going to fill you in on everything you need to know about this regular POCO F7. I'll outline the specs, explain how this compares to the other ones, and hopefully this will help you decide if this F7 is the right F7 for you. First things first, of course, let's unbox it. Sliding off the lid, you're immediately greeted by that bright yellow POCO color scheme and logo. Inside the first little packet, there's a SIM ejector tool if you need it, as well as a whole bunch of paperwork and instructions that we all definitely read. And then POCO still includes this thin rubbery case to protect your shiny new phone. Next up is the POCO F7 itself. You get a sneak peek at some of the specs there, and at the very bottom of the box, there's a few more things. There's a 90-watt USB wall plug to fast charge this phone from 0 to 80% in under 30 minutes, and a USB-A to USB-C cable to pair it with. So with all that stuff out of the way, here is the new POCO F7 once again. I actually ended up getting the Cyber Silver limited edition variant, which looks really cool, and as we power it up here for the first time, let's just quickly talk pricing and availability. Now, this phone will be available in most parts of the world, besides the US, and can be pre-ordered right now from Xiaomi's website. There's two configuration options, 256 gigabytes of storage and 512 gigabytes of storage, and the full retail price for each is between $399 and $449, depending on the currency conversions. Xiaomi is running a few different promotions right now, including an early bird discount and elevated trade-in offers through July 7th. So if you do want this phone, you can jump on those special deals and save a few bucks, which is nice. Up front, it may not be totally obvious, but the POCO F7 is actually the biggest of the trio, and at 6.83 inches corner to corner, that's actually a bit bigger than most other Android phones. Do you notice that extra 0.2 of an inch? Not necessarily, but it is interesting that the cheapest F7 now has the biggest display, and thus the best screen-to-body ratio at over 90%, with slim, even black borders all around. This phone is definitely a handful, but honestly, it doesn't feel that big, and I would say that if you're coming from any other 6.7-inch device, this one won't be too drastic of a change. Around back, this F7 definitely looks a lot more different than the other F7s in a number of ways. Obviously, this special edition design stands out. It's a half metallic, half almost see-through or faux modular look. The top third here shows some screws, ventilation, the Snapdragon logo, along with a few other patterns and stripes. All of this is covered by a clear glass back panel, but it's a really unique looking phone to say the least. If this is too much for you, there's also plain black and white color variants you can get instead. Aside from the limited edition finish, the other obvious difference is the camera setup. And it's not just those green stripes. This phone has a more honest double lens layout, while the F7 Pro tried to mimic the F7 Ultra's triple lens setup, even though the Pro has also just two camera lenses. Altogether, this phone definitely looks very different from the other two F7s. A few other things to note: the frame is all aluminum and totally flat with a fairly thin profile. The front glass is the Gorilla Glass 7i variety, and there is a thin plastic screen protector pre-installed on this phone out of the box. It's also IP68 water and dust resistant as well. Taking a look around at everything else, there's nothing on the left side. On the right, your usual volume and power buttons, a little microphone hole at the top, and at the bottom, the main loudspeaker, alongside the USB-C port and SIM card tray. Two slight limitations with this here: dual physical SIM, but no no micro SD card support, obviously, and no eSIM support within the phone either, which is a little odd, I think. And I mentioned already that you can spec this phone with 256 gigs or 512 gigs of storage, which is a decent amount of space for the price. Though there's so many pre-installed games and other junk apps on this phone that you'll want to claw some of that storage back right away. I'm sure Xiaomi partners with these companies to help subsidize the price of this phone, which is great, but all these apps are starting to be a bit much. The in-display fingerprint sensor on this F7 is the older optical kind, not the faster ultrasonic one found on the other F7s, but that's not a huge deal to me. It still unlocks fast enough, and there's what POCO calls AI face unlock, which is very quick too. As for the screen itself, well, you do get most of the screen specs from the other two F7s, which is great, just with a couple minor exceptions. The big 6.83-inch display is still a Super AMOLED panel, and it's a better than 1080 resolution 1280 by 2772. And it, of course, offers a 120Hz high refresh rate. The other F7s do have a bit more pixels. Those phones are the QHD variety, but besides that, what you'll likely notice more is the brightness difference. This F7 peaks at the same 3200 nits, but its high brightness mode is 100 nits less than its counterparts, and its maximum user-controlled typical brightness is only about 700 nits. I think you'll want all the brightness you can get if you're regularly outside in the sun or on the go, but for casual at-home viewing, this is still a pretty awesome display. That's probably a higher spec than its price point would suggest. It supports Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus content. It's very vibrant and colorful, even if you do crank up the brightness, and probably a little more so with it up. And you can adjust the screen 6 ways to Sunday in settings if you feel like something doesn't quite look right. Boost the saturation or crank it down. You can adjust the textures, text, and more. While the F7 Pro and F7 Ultra should definitely have as good of screens as possible, this regular F7 didn't need to go so hard with the display, and there's only very minor differences or downgrades here by comparison. So if the visuals are what you care about most, I think opting for this regular F7 is the best option. I mean, the few very minor differences you might see on paper really don't make much of a difference when you actually are viewing your content. This is just a great display from start to finish, especially for the price. And you also get a pretty decent set of speakers on this phone too. One main one at the bottom, a secondary one in the earpiece that, when combined, produce a very loud and distortion-free sound even at maximum volume. Now, I think what most people are interested in with the new POCO F7 is what's powering it. So let's talk about that. Inside this F7, this phone has got the all-new Snapdragon 8S Gen 4 chip paired with the Adreno 825 GPU and 12 gigabytes of RAM. This is just the second smartphone to have this Snapdragon processor on the market right now, and the 12 gigabytes of RAM, by the way, is the same as what the Pro and Ultra got. Here are the Geekbench scores for this new 8S chip, and a couple of things I want to mention. First, while the performance numbers suggest that this 8S Gen 4 rivals the flagship Snapdragon 8 Elite, that's not quite the full story. The chipset here may, on paper, produce a similar or better benchmark number, but the 8 Elite is likely still better optimized and more modern, with more capabilities, more power for complex tasks, and perhaps even better cooling too. With that being said, the 8S Gen 4 here in this phone is nearly a flagship level processor for literally 1/3 or 1/4 the price of what it would otherwise be inside, say, a Samsung S series device. And that's pretty incredible. The value you get here is unmatched right now, and if specs and performance are what you're after, I think the dollar for dollar value you get with this F7 is probably better than the F7 Pro and F7 Ultra, but that's if you ignore some of those phones' other elements. The other side of this story, of course, is Xiaomi's HyperOS 2 over Android 15. It's arguably a little more quirky and customized of an Android OS than some other flares, and while I've gotten more familiar with it over the years, using a handful of POCO devices now, there are some elements to HyperOS 2 that take some getting used to. The phone generally does feel fast, but I think with so much hyper OS-ness throughout this OS, it can sometimes feel a little clunky. Fortunately, Xiaomi is promising up to 4 full years of Android OS updates for this phone and 6 total years of security updates. So you get a nice long lifespan out of this thing, even for its price tag. It's not as good as a Samsung A series or Pixel device guarantee, for example, but it's still a solid promise from Xiaomi. I'm personally most curious to see how this new Snapdragon processor fares in the coming weeks, especially compared to the Elite, which I'm more familiar with, and even more mid-range spec devices with mid-tier processors. Xiaomi is marketing this 8S chip as a flagship component, which I guess is technically the case, but I will just say that we're almost starting to get into confusing territory now with these slight variations of processors. So that's another reason why I really want to see how this phone actually performs versus just getting a processor with a similar name and similar performance scores to that tried and true flagship processor variety. One region-dependent difference with this POCO F7 is battery size. For folks in India, you guys get a massive 7550 mAh battery inside this phone. For everyone else, you still get a pretty big 6500 mAh battery. Either way, that's a whole heck of a lot larger than the standard issue 5000 mAh batteries we're used to seeing in other Android phones, and the 6000 mAh and 5300 mAh batteries found inside the other two F7s. And paired with the super fast charging support, I'd be surprised if you ever need to be plugged in longer than 30 minutes throughout any given day. I can see this phone easily lasting through even a hectic or game-focused day of use with 20 or 30% battery remaining at least. And I suspect this phone would easily outlast any other mid-tier device or better that you're currently using. Lastly, when it comes to those cameras around back, while the design and layout is pretty different than the other F7s, the hardware doesn't actually differ all that much. You still get a 50 megapixel main shooter, that's a Sony sensor, and an 8 megapixel ultra wide, which is, I think, about the same as the one that's on the F7 Pro. The Ultra, by comparison, has a telephoto zoom lens and a far better ultra wide shooter, so that's your difference there. And for the selfie lens, it's a 20 megapixel shooter just like the F7 Pro. I think the shooting modes and settings hidden within the camera app allow this phone to feel like it has a better camera setup than it actually is, but arguably the couple of quick sample shots I took look pretty good. You can shoot up to 4K 60 FPS video, there's a high detail Ultra HD photo mode, along with long exposure, which is sort of a unique feature on a budget device. There's even motion tracking for video amongst the Pro controls. I still think that there's way more value in some other mid-tier devices when it comes to the camera capabilities, and it seems like a lot of folks agree that POCO is still a bit behind, even for average everyday pictures. But honestly, this is just so much more than we were getting even a couple of years ago. So while it may feel like less than ideal right now, it's, I think, a decent value, especially when you package it in with everything else this phone seems to offer. Releasing a third F7 device that's slightly different than the other F7s is a pretty bold strategy by POCO, honestly. Between the bigger size display, brand new flagship tier processor, massive battery, and very similar camera specs, I feel like this F7 almost makes the other F7s not as enticing now. But what do you guys think? Is this the F7 to buy amongst the other F7s, or would you rather go Pro or Ultra? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.